wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, yeah. I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great.
Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jeremy Thiel, Senior Manager of Marketing Ideas and Education at DriverCheck, and I'll be your host for today's discussion in our video series of Living Your Best Life. Today's episode is titled, Are You in the Game or in the Stands? And joining me is Jonathan Creaghan, who is an author, senior leadership coach. He gets people to think differently. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, Jeremy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me in, Jeremy. I know this is our second time being together, and I'm really excited about talking about living your best life. And the in the stands and in the game is actually a model that we created many years ago to help people do a quick self-assessment about the situation that they find themselves in, and sort of what their thinking is, what their feelings are, what their emotions are, and then they can choose to have those emotions and feelings and thoughts, or they can shift them. But until they know the difference, that people are stuck.
And so for those of you who may not know myself or Jonathan, we've had some of these ongoing conversations before in the past. And really the purpose for us for doing more of these videos is we're trying to empower others to make positive changes in their lives. We're trying to provide some knowledge on how people can live their best natural life. It's not just hocus pocus or fairy dust magic coined phrase. And it's one thing to be aware of your thoughts and actions, but to actually do something about it is where the magic happens. So if you are like me, sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, then this series is going to be for you. And the time is to make a commitment to change now. So let's just dive right into it, Jonathan.
I'm excited.
Good, great. So when we talk about are you in the game or in the stands, from my understandings and my learnings, it's a lot about emotional responses versus strategic responses. Do you think that's a good spot for us to start?
I think that's a great spot because it really does, talk about what's the best response that's going to be useful to you at that moment in time. And when we look at an emotional response comes out of a place where your thinking gets clouded by the emotions that you're carrying. And, similar to being in the stands at a football game, like the picture that we have behind us, right? Which is great. You're, not only are you caught up in your emotions, but you're caught up in the collective emotions of the people in the stands with you. And you're sharing that sort of, experience with them. So something goes on in the field and you're seeing it, you're experiencing what's going on, maybe the referee made a bad call and you get all upset about it and you're reacting to the play that was called. It's coming out of a place of spontaneous emotion or even thoughtful, sort of purposeful emotion. And it's not always useful in the situation that you find yourself in your day-to-day life. Maybe it's fun at a football game, but it may not be useful at work or with your children or with your spouse or in coaching a little league baseball team or whatever, right? So we have these external forces pounding in on us, and they are causing an emotional reaction where the emotion is dictating the thought and the behavior, as opposed to a strategic response, which is one where you're much more thoughtful. You're stepping away from the emotion. You're stepping away from the collective energy of the group that you're with or the collective energy of the people in the stands. and you're stepping back and you're observing and you're noticing your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, and you're responding based on a thoughtful um, result of your observation. So the behavior might be much more focused. It might be much more useful to the outcome that you're looking for, because you're not being controlled by these external forces pounding in on you. Rather, you're almost controlling what that outcome is based on your perception of what is going on shifting.
And I love the comparison, Jonathan, of in the stands or in the game. I am that loudmouth person at a game, screaming at referees, heckling goalies.
Yeah.
My friends are embarrassed to go to games with me. But that's my energy. That's the sort of things I'm passionate about. But then when you think about the players in the game, you know, especially your elite players, the ones who don't get wrapped up in that bad call by a referee, because they happen all the time. And when you think about how you react in your home life, you said it beautifully. It might be okay for Jeremy to be, you know, a couple beers deep and cheering on his favorite team and screaming at a referee, but that's not okay in the home setting or necessarily in the work setting. So I love the comparison.
Yeah, it's really important to make that distinction, isn't it? Because it's all about how useful it is to you, right? And are you going to get the outcomes that you are expecting? And it goes back to, you know, that famous thing, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Well, my, at the time, 14-year-old younger son said, you know, Dad, that's actually not about insanity. That's about awareness.
From a 14-year-old.
From my kid. I thought, holy crap, that's really amazing, right? So the definition of being unaware is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Because you're not aware. So you're like this automaton, you're like this robot going through your historical thinking and your historical assumptions about something, and you're reacting instead of having the freedom of choice, of option that strategically responding allows you to have, which might serve the moment even better. Well, it will serve the moment better.
Mm-hmm. And so simple enough to say, right? And I know
right.
I started out, because again, for those who don't know, I've been working with Jonathan for about 3 years. And I was aware of everything that he was saying and mindful, but I wasn't necessarily fully committed to living it out. And that's where the whole birth of this idea, living your best life, came out of. It's how do you actually make that commitment to change that's going to impact yourself, you know? And for me, it reduced anxiety and stress, improved my family life, improved my work life. But a lot of people might, or naysayers or doubters might be like, man, what are these guys smoking and where can I get some? But what I would love for you to share, Jonathan, is it's as simple as you can make changes today. So what can people do in order to start thinking differently and being aware of that they're, again, watching, being aware of those emotional reactions versus strategic?
Well, and you've said it very clearly right there. You just start being aware. It's literally as simple as that. When you sort of step out of and become aware of yourself in situations, aware of other people that you're interacting with, so being aware of your audience, being aware of what's around you, being aware of your thinking, your feelings, reactions, and emotions, you know, to situations and people, then it becomes pretty clear to us whether or not what we're doing makes sense to us. But there's different layers of awareness that we have. Some are very obvious and very overt. And as you're building the, your layers of awareness of yourself, then you start to recognize thoughts or feelings or reactions that are just on the edge of consciousness. And then as you get even better and better and better at it, then unconscious things start bubbling up to the surface around conclusions you drew as a child, or situations you had that you can connect back to. Oh, this situation here that I have right now started when I was 10 years old in this situation. You don't have to go there. Like that's doing this over and over and over. Really, to get started, it's simply observing yourself in the moment, becoming aware of your thoughts, feelings, reactions, becoming aware of your audience and what's around you, and observing it without judgment. Being curious about why it is you're doing, why you're reacting the way you are at that moment.
And what's beautiful about this, it's, again, for me personally, once I became committed to being aware, but doing a change that's connected to that awareness. So there's difference between being aware of where your head's going, or arguments, or things that you're making up in your mind, making up shit in your head. So you might be aware of it, but there's difference between being aware and then actually stopping those negative comments,
right?
Those time suckers, those energy suckers.
Right.
And that's where, for me, it's like a weight's lifted off your shoulders. And I use, like, when I talk to my friends and family and viewers, I give it like an example of, my wife's going to be angry at me because I didn't take out the garbage today. And then I'm making that assumption, and I'm starting to go down this path inside my head about what's she going to say to me? She's going to be pissed off. What am I going to respond? Now I'm going to be pissed off. And literally it takes seconds, can lead into minutes, but how is that being productive whatsoever? So what I could do is, one, take out the garbage. Secondly, don't waste my energy on, maybe she would have said, I get it. Sometimes I make mistakes too. Or, do you know what I mean? So when you talk about observing without judgment, why should I be deciding what my wife's going to be saying to me or not about something? Do you know what I mean? So,
and if I could just add to that great explanation, observing yourself without judgment. That is, don't beat yourself up because you reacted to that situation. You're learning. And what we've noticed over time teaching this is that at very, very first time, people notice their reaction after they've had it. So there's some sort of a time lag between the reaction you have and you noticing the reaction. And it could be minutes, or it could be half an hour, or it could be seconds. As you get better at the habit of noticing and being aware, that time collapses until you're in the moment and you notice yourself doing it, and you can switch right there to preparing ahead of time that you might be going into that place that you don't want to go into based on habit with that person or that situation. And you can adjust yourself before you go in. So it's like you have to work backwards to that point, to the point where you're actually looking at the future and choosing a different option. I think there's a real connection between living your best life and choice and options. And if you think about what living your best life means for you and look at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, then it might be motivating to do what it is that we're exploring here this afternoon, because your best life has to be compelling. It has to it has to be more important to you than those things that you're stuck on.
Because you have said to me before, severing the past from your future.
Yeah, that's that actually comes out of a book, and I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically the character had just lost his father, or a very dear friend who brought him up, and the father was passing away, or the good friend was passing away, and he said, once severed from the future, the past has no power over you. It was paraphrasing it, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, if there is no future, what's the point in holding on to a past? And in this case, it's about the death of a dear person, right? So you're going to hold on to the good about that person, but you don't have to hold on to the negativity, the stories, whatever it is that held you back from fully loving that person.
And so what I learned from that is, not dwelling on the past if it's not going to help you move forward. So
right.
Let's say someone honks their horn at me today because I didn't do a complete stop at a stop sign. Of course, I always follow the rules, but let's just say hypothetically, right. And that person, raging their fist in anger, I'm not going to think about this person ever again. I'm not going to dwell on that emotion. Yeah, I made a mistake. I'll be more mindful to come to a complete stop, whatever it is, not dwelling it. And when you talk about the passing of a loved one, and I've shared this with Jonathan and others before, but my father passed away in February unexpectedly, and I was some raw emotion after that. And due to COVID, I haven't seen my parents as often as I would normally, or as would like, because we have our own life here with my wife and 2 kids, and want to keep everyone safe. So in the moment of my father's passing, I had so much regret. If I had done this differently and did this, but coming to realize very quickly after, it wasn't going to move me forward thinking about all those regrets. So I loved my father dearly. He knew that. Nothing that I was dwelling on was going to be helpful for me to get over and mourn my father. So instead, I can celebrate his life, like you say, and cherish those good memories. But any of the stuff that's just going to weigh me down, that I have zero control over, I stopped wasting my energy thinking about it.
That either you did or did not do that you wished you had done or not done, or what he did or did not do that you wish he hadn't or had done. It just let it go, right? And then what takes its place is forgiveness of self and others and love, because that's all there is. That's the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. And I lost both my parents this last year and the previous year, and had to do exactly the same thing you did. It was just time. Living your best life is about energy. It's about capacity, right? Which is the total amount of time and energy you have to move your life forward, to live your best life. And everybody has a finite vessel of energy. And if you're constantly in the stands, the energy you're expending is just enormous. If you're strategically responsive, you get to choose how you use that energy. Everybody has a finite vessel. You can improve it with better, sleeping habits and eating, but it's still a finite vessel of energy. So how do you want to utilize that energy towards living your best life? And emotions take up an enormous amount of energy, and which is probably better served through some other, translating or transferring or using the energy you have through emotion is just using your energy in that way. If you didn't use it towards emotion, what could you use that energy for? Right. And so when you're in the game, you're focused in the moment, and all the chatter in your head is gone, and you're attending to, and you're aware of your audience, and you're aware of what's around you. When you're truly in the game, in that high performing peak human experience of a flow state, then you're not thinking. Time stands still. Who you are doesn't matter, and the end result, or the process towards the end result, becomes much more compelling, and the ultimate goal.
So what would you suggest? So again, this is all theories for people who are hearing it for the first time.
Right.
How can someone leave today's episode and put something into practice? And for me, like you said, slowing down, digesting, being aware of my emotions in the now. But what are some tips that you would suggest for the viewers?
Well, your point about slowing down is right on, and you slow down through observing without judgment. So that would be definitely one thing. I would also learn how to breathe. If you observe your own breathing, when you breathe up from your chest, your voice is higher, the speed of your voice is faster, and it's because the amount of time it takes for the breath to get from your lungs to your mouth and out is a shorter period of time. There's less distance, and that is connected to the speed at which you're thinking. So when you're thinking fast and rapidly, and it's filled with emotion, and your chattering thinking mind is going off, you're more likely to be breathing up in your chest than you are in your stomach. It takes a lot longer for a breath to get from the stomach and out. And so you're probably going to you are going to speak slower. You can notice, like, already I started to breathe out of my stomach, and what happened? There was more silence. My voice was slower, a bit lower. And correspondingly, the thoughts in my head slowed right down to becoming almost non-existent. So by learning how to breathe through your stomach, you actually slow everything down. So observe what's around you, without judgment as much as possible. And that takes some practice. Breathe through your stomach and let gravity pull you down so that you feel grounded in the seat, or you're grounded in your bed just before you go to sleep, or you feel your feet on the ground, and it drives the thought to slow down. And if you remember, in the workshop we did a couple of years ago, we had you guys break off into, come up with a story, and then we had you tell the story, and then we had you breathe from your gut and tell the story, and then we had you tell the story being grounded and breathing, and you told the story, and the listener did exactly the same thing, and there were qualitatively different experiences, both as a listener and as a storyteller. And I don't know if you directly remember that.
I do.
And what happened, for you, if you can remember, and kind of.
Yeah, for me, like, I speak fast with high energy to begin with. And so I always have to be mindful when I'm speaking to an audience that I need to slow it down, which a lot of it does come back to breathing, like you just mentioned. But I'm able to describe my thinking in a more clear, concise manner. my tone's not as fired up and could become across as aggressive, as an example. And then the recipient of the information, they're able to receive the information at a slower pace because it's coming to them clearer, and they are able to digest and come back with a slower, calmer demeanor in their delivery. So if you ever go into a conversation or an argument with someone and you're already fired up and animated, that's either going to scare the other person, intimidate that other person, their back's up against the wall, or they might come back at you with an equally, furious set of energy. So when you can slow down everything, it's just so much more clear.
Well, and that's closer, I think, to living your best life. I think it directly impacts on relationships, because your energy gets transferred to that other person. They pick up on the energy. It's very powerful. It gets stuck in them. They are either self-aware enough to be able to, sort of divest themselves of it, or they get trapped in it and they express it back. And it's a feedback loop where, again, you have options if you're strategically responsive. Maybe prior to that, you can adjust how you're going to do it, or you can think strategically about how you're going to approach the situation, or you can, at the very least, observe without judgment, breathe through your stomach, let gravity pull you down, and then go into the situation.
Because where I've put this into practice is if I have a tough conversation, or I'm worried about something, or I have a little bit of awkward conversations coming up, that I'm a little bit nervous, scared, whatever, I'll do those breathing exercises before I go into that conversation. So before I call Jonathan to have a tough conversation, 2 or 3 minutes, I literally just calm down and focus on that breathing, so that by the time I get onto the call, I'm already in a better demeanor. And if it is difficult, but I'm thinking more clearly on how to explain something that could be challenging, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can go into it prepared, and this is, again, the toughest part when you talk about emotional responses, it's getting ahead of that emotion. So if you know you are going to be emotional, this is where you can prepare yourself for tough conversations or whatever instances by doing that breathing and observing without judgment, like you say. Beautiful.
Well, those 3 steps, we actually call them a walking meditation. So, people think that they have to find a spot on the floor and, meditate for 15 or 20 minutes and learn that discipline. And that's all good stuff, right? But the practicality is we live in a world where that may not be possible. You have a house filled with kids. COVID has certainly kept people housebound. You may not have that special spot you can go to, turn on a little music, light a candle, sit quietly for 5 or 10 minutes. So what if you could meditate on the run? I know it sounds like a juxtaposition, but you're going to be running. So why don't you use that time in between to find some peace and find some quiet while you're moving, moving from one activity to the next. Mm-hmm. And, people report, like you just reported, that their head is clearer, they make better decisions, they see the situations more clearly, they can analyze exactly what the issue is better, and all those things lead to living one's best life.
So I want to be mindful of our time today, Jonathan. So Jonathan and I have spitballed and brainstormed a whole bunch of different exciting ideas for episodes that we'll be sharing with everyone. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more to come in the coming weeks. So Jonathan, I love these conversations. I'm excited for this just for the beginning.
So there's lots of really cool stuff that we can do. that's very practical. I really like the way that you're bringing it back to practical, because, you know, this, to us, this is a way of operating in the world. It's not a theory. It's actually a very powerful way of operating every day, every minute, every second.
And that's living your best life. And part of our conversation was to inspire others to be the best natural versions of themselves. We know it's obtainable. A little bit goes a long way. So hopefully some the people who have been watching today or at any point can take any little bit of a learning and apply it to their everyday life, but making a commitment to make change, right? And that is the key thing. So if you know you're freaking out because, again, you know, you forgot to take out the garbage, be mindful and aware that you're going down that path, and park it and put that energy with, again, your vessel that's only got so much capabilities, and put your mind to something that's more productive.
Yeah, and it just to quickly wrap up, maybe some field work people can do is they can take, you know, 5 minutes and jot down the top 5 things that put you into an emotional reactive place, and just look at those 5 things, and then see if there's not a strategic response to them instead, and then let Jeremy know sort of what happened when you did that, so that we can celebrate it with you next time.
I love that. So we'll include my email address. I would love to hear the comments, and looking forward to the next conversation, Jonathan. Thanks so much for coming,
Jeremy.
Today.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I just want to be great. Yeah, I just want to be great. Yeah, I just want to be great. Yeah, yeah.